There's really only one topic I want to talk about this week, and I think it's the same thing that's on a lot of people's minds, and that is what the heck is going to happen now. Life in this country is about to get a lot more interesting than it's already been for people in vulnerable populations. I've already helped 65 families move to Minnesota from out of state over the past few years, and in the past few days, I've actually been inundated with more people asking me questions about moving to Minnesota, and they are leaving areas of the country where they feel that there is state-sanctioned discrimination in place against themselves or against their loved ones. This election feels like a breaking point for a lot of people, and I really want to let you know that if you are looking for a place with legal protections in place for you or your loved ones, Minnesota might actually be the place for you. My name is Mary Schumann, and I am a realtor here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and I have helped so many people move to Minnesota, often because they want to live somewhere that doesn't make them feel like they are being attacked by their own government. I'm putting my contact information in the description box and in the comments. If you have questions, please reach out. I will do what I can to get you answers. I may also be able to get you in contact with people that have made this move already and that may have the same concerns that you do. So, you'll have somebody to talk to that has done it and can ask some questions of them. As we watch state after state pass anti-LGBTQ laws and villainize people just trying to live their lives, as we watch states pass laws around women's rights to their own bodies and propose even more draconian ideas like removing access to birth control, as we watch doctors that are afraid to practice life-saving medicine for fear of being imprisoned, as we watch states go after librarians and institute book bans, as we watch public schools losing funding and having it diverted to private religious education, as we watch all manner of state-sanctioned hate toward people that aren't white, many wonder, is there any place that isn't going to go along with this? Is there a place that believes in protecting the rights to our own bodies and minds? Right now, that place does remain Minnesota, and please don't mistake me. The entire state is not some sort of Shangri-La. The rural areas here often hold a lot of the same right-wing ideas that have won the day in the presidential election. However, we happen to have a few large population centers that are clinging to these values, and we have a governor that still wants to protect these rights, especially in the face of what is likely to come based on the campaign that we just saw. This is more than a feeling. It's a series of laws that have been passed here to codify these protections, and I want to give you an overview of the types of protections that are in place in Minnesota for LGBTQ and women and other communities. So let's start with the Minnesota Human Rights Act. This is a state law that prohibits discrimination in employment, housing, public accommodations, public services, education, credit, and business. And this is all based on protected classes like the usual ones: race, religion, disability, your national origin, sex, marital status, and familial status, your age. They added sexual orientation and gender identity. Since 1989, Minnesota laws were expanded to cover hate crimes based on a person's sexual orientation, and in 1993, sexual orientation was expanded as a definition to include the category of gender identity. Last year, gender identity was explicitly added as a separate category from sexual orientation, and they repealed all of the exemptions for non-public service organizations such as the Boy Scouts within the anti-discrimination provisions. Lesbian couples here have access to in vitro fertilization. State law does recognize the person who is the non-genetic, non-gestational mother or the birth mother as a legal parent to a child born via donor insemination, but only if the parents are married. Surrogacy, they really don't even talk about this, but the courts have generally ruled in favor of couples of same-sex or opposite sex using the gestational or traditional surrogacy process. All right, regarding transgender rights, changing legal gender on Minnesota birth certificates and other identity documents does not require going under sex reassignment surgery. The state will issue a new birth certificate upon receipt of a letter from a physician confirming appropriate treatment for gender transition or a court order for gender change. The applicant also has to sign a birth certificate application form in front of a notary and pay a fee. But the registrar will then issue a new birth certificate, and the old one with the old gender will remain confidential. The Minnesota Drivers and Vehicle Services will update a driver's license or state ID card upon request of the actual individual. You don't have to have any documentation to have them do that. Health insurance here in Minnesota, the state's Medicaid policy covers care related to transgender people, and Minnesota law prohibits health insurance providers from excluding coverage for transgender-specific care or discriminating against transgender patients. If you want to change your legal sex designation, you can do that. Since October 2018, Minnesota has allowed X as a sex descriptor on a driver's license or state ID. You don't have this option for the birth certificate, but you also don't need to do anything to get that. They'll do it on request. You can just go in and request that that be changed on your driver's license. In March 2023, there was an executive order signed by the governor of Minnesota to legally protect or defend gender-affirming services and care for individuals anywhere inside the state of Minnesota. In April 2023, the legislature passed a bill that formally codifies and implements this executive order into Minnesota state legislation permanently. The governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, you may have heard of him, signed the bill into law, and it was effective immediately. In April of 2023, the legislature here passed a bill to codify and implement a legal ban on conversion therapy practices here in Minnesota. The bill was formally signed into law by the governor and went into effect on August 1st of 2023. And Minnesota has a state council for LGBTQ Minnesotans. So they're part of the government decision-making and concerns. Regarding book bans, there is a law known as the Access to Library Materials and Rights Protection, which prevents public libraries, university libraries, and libraries in public and charter schools from removing reading materials based on messages or opinions the book conveys. Beyond just being able to read what you decide to read or allow your children to read what you actually deem is appropriate for your own children and provide a diverse perspective to the whole population, this is actually an important protection for vulnerable communities because titles representing voices of LGBTQ, Black, Indigenous, people of color made up 47% of the titles targeted for censorship. Let's talk about women's rights. Abortion has been legal and protected by the Constitution of the state of Minnesota since 1995. In the past year and a half, the PRO Act was passed, and that law codifies an individual's right to control their own reproductive health. It also plainly states that the Minnesota Constitution protects the fundamental right to reproductive freedom. Finally, the statute prohibits local units of government from imposing any additional restrictions on access to reproductive health care services. Doctors and other providers have legal protection here for providing legal women's health care. So, those are your protections in a nutshell here, but there is a lot more to Minnesota than this. My channel talks about a lot of what it's like to live here, what various neighborhoods and suburbs look like. I talk about the real estate market here. If you're thinking of moving here, please, watch more videos, reach out with questions, and just know that you are not alone. There has been a wave of people that have already made the choice, and if you come, you're going to be amongst many that are choosing to do so now. I'm always happy to talk to people that meet me on YouTube. If you have questions, I encourage you to reach out because I will do my best to give you resources that will help you figure it out. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great week.